This is not an official podcast of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, NSDAR, and does not necessarily represent the position of the NSDAR. This interview is being conducted for the Daughter Dialogues Oral History Project. The interviewer is Risha Rainey. The narrator is Shelley Murphy. Shelley, can you share with me how old you are?
I am 68 years old.
Where were you born?
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a real estate broker, and he also had an accounting firm for small businesses, and my mom worked for General Motors.
What did she do for General Motors?
She was at what they called Plant 1, which was like the women's plant, and she sold cushions for car cushions, Camaros, and things like that.
Did you grow up with brothers and sisters?
Yes, I did. I actually have 4 brothers and no sisters.
The only girl. How was that for you?
Lovely. I love it. I think my personality might be a little different, and some of my approaches are different because I grew up with so many males around me, and I didn't have a lot of girlfriends growing up.
How is your personality different because of the influence of your brothers?
I have a little more dominant personality, very competitive. Not to say that others might not be, but very competitive. And always was trying to beat my brothers at whatever I could.
Did you ever win?
Absolutely, I won. And my daddy raised me more like the raising of the boys. I have the business aspects. They didn't get it. Working, like in a company or something like that, just running a business. And I could also con them out anything I wanted to do.
Do you have any particular stories that stand out to you?
Well, one is like doing the dishes. I charged them. They hated to do the dishes. And my dad always, it was 5 of us kids. And we all had our chores and everybody shared on the dishes. So I said, they're going to have to pay me because they hated to do it. So I charged them and I did them.
You were also a Brownie and a Girl Scout, so you did spend some time with other girls.
I did, as much as they allowed that involvement to happen. And this would have been in the 60s. And yes, I did Brownie and Girl Scouts. I think I was actually the only African American in that troop.
When you said as much as they would allow that to happen, who are they?
Well, the Girl Scout group that I was with, I wasn't always included on some of the sleepovers, and I would find out about them after the fact because one of my little friends there would tell, "Why didn't you come?" And I didn't know about it. So, I couldn't conclude anything else except that they didn't want me because I was a person of color.
In your neighborhood, was it a mostly Black neighborhood or integrated? What type of neighborhood did you grow up in?
It was an integrated neighborhood. And so we lived right across the street from a school, elementary school. But we were at the end of town per se. So it wasn't a mixed neighborhood that much.
It was mostly white?
Yeah, I would say it was mostly white. There were Blacks in the neighborhood, but it wasn't like other areas within the city of Grand Rapids. Like I was born on a different street than where I was raised at. And the street that I was born on was predominantly Black. But where I was raised at was not. And I moved to the new neighborhood on Fuller Street, when I was 2 years old. And so it's basically moving into a white neighborhood per se.
Do you have any other particular strong memories from childhood?
Yeah, there was a little lady next door to us, an elderly lady that she would tell on us if we did something wrong.
Did this lady ever tell on you, did you do something wrong and you got caught?
Oh, yeah, Mrs. Bates did, I'm sure. Yes. Well, one, being out late, due to the time when, when the street lights came on, you were supposed to be in the house, but we could sneak into the house because of a side door to go down into a basement. And a lot of times our parents didn't know. And yeah, but she would tell, or she'd come out and start yelling at us a little bit and telling us to go in, which my parents would be able to hear. And another thing, we grew up in this area where when I was little, the doors weren't locked and the windows were open. And, there's no way we would even think of that now.
Do you see the wisdom of Mrs. Bates now, where she's like, go home, it's dark? That she was trying to keep, it's like it takes a village to raise a child. Do you feel like, it was appropriate and that was really what she should have been doing? Or do you still, as an adult, feel like she was a little meddlesome?
No, there was a lot of value to that. And again, the neighborhood changed over the years and became a lot more, other blacks moved into the neighborhood and things. But I love the fact that she did do that, because that made like the village taking care, the village takes care of the community per se and the families. And so everybody was looking out for everybody back then. So it was very much appreciated now as an adult, definitely. And then, of course, having my own children.
Tell me about high school.
High school was not a great thing for me. I went to the school and my friends were there, of course, but I had challenges also there. I had went to night school and summer school getting extra credit because I was going to go into the Army under the buddy system with my cousin. And what I did not know is that you needed to have attendance along with passing. So it wasn't just about going to school or anything like that. So that was a challenge, and which caused me to drop out. I was very angry because I was trying to get my high school graduation early and graduate in January versus June, because wanting to go into the Army, and they wouldn't give me my diploma. And again, I went to night school, and I also went to summer school finishing up classes. And then when it came time, they said, no, I didn't have enough hours. And again, that would have came from me actually skipping school, which of course, I figured that out later, but not at the time. So I dropped out of school in my senior year in that January, and with a lot of anger. And, I did go back and graduate, but I did drop and miss the graduation, with my class and everything. So, but yeah, it was challenging. So I understand, a lot with children these days. I understand that when, a rough time in school, because it was a battle. Back then, you just didn't have the same type of rules and things that they have nowadays. No one's was going to knock on the door because I dropped out. No one was going to call the parents. That kind of stuff just didn't happen back then in, say, 1968, 69. And so I just dropped out. But I always had that dream of going to school, and going to college and stuff. And it just didn't happen that way till later.
Why were you skipping classes?
Running the streets, probably doing things I didn't need to be doing if I look back at it now. Also had a little bit of attitude like, I already know this. And a lot of my friends were not there. So, and I actually left out of my house at the age of 16. So, and was on my own pretty much, had a place to live and work and all of that. Had a big fight per se with my father, and that was it.
Right. What did your parents say when you were dropping out? What was their reaction?
Nothing. And again, that was your choice. You're going to reap the benefit, and that's your problem. The emphasis was not there of the negatives of that. the emphasis was more about, you got to survive. How are you going to do that? If you go do this and it was done, then you're on your own. So that I just knew I had to make that. If I made that determination, I knew I was on my own and I had to survive my own self.
What made you want to go back and finish high school?
Because I still had that little girl dream of going to school, wanting to be a nurse and a teacher and all that kind of stuff. And then I felt it was going to beat me because I was going to miss out on something. I knew I couldn't get into college because there was that dream. So I went back. I finished up basically a class during the summer, and that gave me enough hours back to graduate in the later year in 1971, the next year. But again, I went out with an attitude. And that's why I worked as a parole officer and dealt so well with some of the kids and, that I had for delinquents, because I understood that attitude. And, I was striving for something and they didn't let me have it. So that was a whole, another type of feeling that I had, that they were trying to beat me. So that competitive edge came back and I thought, no, I'm going to go back. And then the father of my children actually said he was not going to have a girlfriend that didn't have a high school diploma. So there's the trigger, the real trigger.
When you went back to school, were you already living on your own and working? And how did you manage the two?
I was working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken down, I'm going to say, in the Black community of Grand Rapids, but it was in a downtown area. Call it the hood, whatever you want to call it. And was working and worked kind of like the third shift. And so, in other words, when the clubs closed at 2:00 in the morning, our Kentucky Fried Chicken was open.
And that gave you enough money to pay for a place for you to live?
Yeah, I actually had other roommates with me. First, it was a couple of guys and then a couple of girls. There was about 6 of us in an apartment. We're all about 17 years old.
You mentioned that the father of your children said, no, I'm not going to be with someone who hasn't graduated high school. So I guess you reacted to that and went back. And then what happened? What became of him? How did you have children, but when did you have children, and what happened with that story?
Well, there's kind of a tragic end to that. So, but it's, my son was born in 1972 and their father was active duty military at the time. And then, of course, he had gotten out right after he was born. And so it was interesting. And again, he thought I had my high school diploma and I didn't. And then my daughter came 4 years later. So we were together. We were not married, never married, but I have 2 children. And he ended up being killed in 1993, which is a tragedy because he was a very intelligent guy. Like I said, he had served his 4 years in the Air Force, and he was actually killed by his nephew, and it was over a drug deal. And so it ended very tragically.
Was he into selling or using drugs?
Absolutely. And we had a kind of a violent relationship between each other. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing and things. So it was didn't end up good. And I knew I had to get out of that relationship. I stayed in it for about 7, almost 8 years before I got married to my husband. I knew I had to get out, number one, because of the kids. And one of the times I remember going to the emergency room and my cousin went with me. And one of the things that made me snap out to get out of it, she made a comment and she told me, she said, "Cuz, I know I'm not going to get all in your business, but you keep living like this, your daughter's going to think it's okay to allow, your man or your boyfriend to beat on you and things like that." And so that's what snapped me out. And then I got out of that relationship totally. And it was long distance from then, and got married, and talked the husband into joining the military, and we left Michigan. And so the rest of the next, 15 so years, I was a happy military wife.
And then what happened after that?
Well, and after that, my husband and I, after I think it was about 15 years, I was leaving there. We had someone to move in the house with us to help take care of them. And it was his mother, and didn't realize that she was, on the brink of Alzheimer's that was coming. And there was a lot of problems. And again, we didn't know what was wrong or anything. And so it was a choice I had to make, was to keep my children in that environment again or get out. And I opt for him not to have to choose between him and his mother and his family. And so I left the family unit with the kids and came to Florida, and where my parents had retired into Tallahassee, Florida. And then that ended that segment of my life.
So his mother's dementia caused the strain on your relationship?
Yes, there was a lot of accusations and things on me and on the children. And I was a real estate broker, real estate agent at the time, and this is in Hawaii. And she just didn't agree with the fact that she was being taken care of, and I didn't want him to have to be in a situation that he had to choose between believing his mother or believing his wife. And he was the youngest son of 8 children, and he only had 2 brothers, and the rest were all sisters, and he was the baby. And so I just said, no, the stress was just not worth it anymore. As much as I cared for him, loved him, our family, our house, our environment, but I wasn't going to make him choose to believe his mother or even think about putting her somewhere. But I guess in my right mind, I could have think that we were the ones living in Hawaii and not on the mainland, and none of the other kids wanted to take her when she got sick. And so I think of that, like 10 years after that, and I thought, I should have known something, because none of her own children wanted to take her in. And in my family, oh my gosh, if somebody got sick, you're going to take care of them. There was just no hesitation whatsoever. She's sick, she needs to be with family. And but I think the other family members knew there was something wrong, and because they didn't take her in. And here we were over in Hawaii and weren't even in Michigan anymore. And but she was with us over a year. And when I left with the kids and moved to Florida, she was still with him. And then I found out later that she ended up with her brother in California. So I never heard anything else. She's passed on now, but just hope that she was well taken care of.
When you got to Florida, tell me about what happened next in your life.
Well, one of the reasons I went to Florida, never had any intentions of ever living in Florida, but my dad was ill, and, his health was up and down. And when I was going through the divorce, all Daddy had to say was, I need you to come home. And that's how I ended up in Tallahassee. And so I stayed with my parents. My son stayed in Hawaii. He was older and arranged. He stayed with good friends of ours who were also military, and they had a son his same age. And so we worked out an arrangement that he could finish high school there. And so my daughter and I came on to Tallahassee. And so we came. It was shock for her, because she was used to the Hawaii environment and kind of didn't understand a black, white, in the South type environment, because she was raised on a military base. And so trying to get her accustomed that, you're okay. This is the South and this, that, and other. And so worked out well. I got my real estate license in Florida and then eventually became a broker, but I also worked for the county there in Tallahassee and oversaw a housing department and had a good career there. And Dad passed, and I was concerned that my mother, who started the genealogy, tracing the family tree, that she would not get to Virginia and without her passing. And so right after Dad passed, I just told her, I said, well, you're not going to die on me, and I can't get you to Virginia. A couple of years after that, I left her and one of my brothers in Tallahassee and my kids and came to Virginia.
Why did she want to get to Virginia so much?
There were so many roots, family roots out of Virginia that I needed to learn, wanted to research. And based on things my mother had shared with me, because she had started researching the family, and then I started helping her. And that's how I got started, listening to her stories, which she listened to her grandmother's stories. And so Tallahassee area was good. I started college there, or finishing up college there, and still helped take care of them. And I gave Mama a choice. I said, when I finish school, I'm moving to Virginia. You can come with me or you can stay here. So I gave her the chance, and of course she did come, and she lives with me now.
You said something remarkable, that while you were in Florida, you earned your bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
That is correct. I finished up my bachelor's degree. I was attending Florida State, and to finish up the classes, because everywhere we moved while I was married, I was able to take classes. It took a long time to get that bachelor's, but I got it.
How long did it take?
That's kind of embarrassing. 28 years from when I graduated from high school. It was off and on as I could, because I was working my way up through the organization. And so the HR director at the county said, we do tuition reimbursement. What? Really? And so then I focused and got it done. And I think that was in 2004 when I finished a bachelor's. It's in
that
social
takes a lot
psychology.
of persistence.
Yeah, my dream as a child, wanted that college degree, because I saw when people had an education or had degrees, they did a little bit more, a little more successful in the range of the fields that I was interested in, real estate and housing and things like that. So, and also even in the military environment, my husband, I knew he had to get his degrees in order to move up in rank. So same type theory I thought of myself. I just needed to do it and didn't want to fail myself and didn't want my kids to think I was failing. And when I was married, stayed a little more focused, because my husband and I both was attending online schools, or the professors were flown into the military bases, and I was able to finish up.
Were you in classes with young people that were decades your junior?
Yeah, but I looked young. That's my thought process. I looked young. They knew I was, when my husband was enlisted and then became an officer. And so they knew I was the officer's wife at that time. But prior to that, I was just another person in the class, because you had all ages.
Then you forged ahead and obtained a master's degree. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I finished a master's degree in Virginia, but I started it in Florida and finished it. And I went on to the online program because I worked full time. So I just wanted to get it done. I was getting older, which doesn't always mean that you're getting wiser. But I was trying to finish the degree, and yeah, I ended up getting a master's in organizational behavior in management.
And after the master's, you didn't stop there. You continued your education, correct?
Yes. I didn't know what to do with myself. When I finished the master's and graduated, it was like, okay, what do I do now? Because with the master's, I forged straight ahead. I didn't stop. I kept going every semester, just kept going. And when I was done, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. I still had my full-time job, but I didn't have homework. I didn't have assignments. And I just said, what the heck? Go for it. And if I ever lost my job, I'd have the doctorate to fall back on because, I could teach, I could write a book. There's some more things I could do with a doctorate than I could with a master's. And again, it's always thinking about this survival type thing, which would have came from my father. I finished my doctorate in 2013.
So you went from a high school dropout to
Yes,
Dr. Shelley Murphy. How did you feel when you first were addressed as Dr. Murphy?
I checked it off the box. I checked that off of my list because I added it on. Oprah Winfrey went through a vision board thing, and I did a vision board. And I was not going to let my daughter see me fail. When I said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And once I opened my mouth, I had to stay committed. And hoping to encourage both of my kids to get their degrees. And I just remember Daddy saying, when I was pregnant with my son, and he just said, well, you know what you got to do. That meant you got to handle this. You got to take care of this. This is your responsibility. And not looking for anybody to help me, but to make sure that I was covered and those kids were not going to be without anything. So, yeah, I forged ahead. I'd like to go back to school now, but I guess you don't get 2 doctorate degrees because I don't have any higher to go unless I totally switched fields or something like that.
Did your children ever even hint at trying to drop out of school? And if they did, what would have been your reaction?
That would have never came into their mind. There's no way.
So a very different upbringing than what you had.
There's
Is that fair
no
to
way.
say?
They were going to go to school. And the thing of it is, and I'm really proud of them because my son has his bachelor's degree and my daughter has her master's. And I'm going to tell you, they never asked for any money, no assistance. Well, wait, my son did one time. And he needed some help with some books. Other than that, they did it all on their own. And I know that's from my genes here, or my personality. But yeah, they were able to accomplish it. And I think my son will probably go for a master's. But we like school. We like the learning. So there's another drive there. So the classroom type aspect is very appealing, something that we enjoy because we're the PBSers, we're the History Channel people. You know what I mean? We're going to watch, we're going to read books and be involved in a lot of things. So, but they also know that the back of their head that there's got to be a backup plan. And so one of the ways is to have an education that you could fall back on.
You and your mother left Florida for Virginia. What happened then?
Well, when I went, she moved first. And a couple of my brothers, once they heard me say that to her, a couple of my brothers grabbed her and they moved to Virginia before I did. And then I came up and she was in Blacksburg at the time for about a year before I moved to Virginia. And again, I'm the only girl. I thought those boys can't take care of mama like I could take care of mama. And so just fell in love with the area that I was going to move to, which was different than where she and my 2 brothers were at.
What did you eventually end up doing once you were in Virginia?
I oversaw a housing program, but I started off as a housing counselor, a HUD certified housing counselor and affordable housing, financial education. That was a field that I love. I still am interested and still connected with the housing field. And another thing, through the whole crash that happened in the United States, I was a housing counselor at that time. Our job was to make sure people were not going to lose their homes or get evicted, and dealing with the homeless.
How did you come about eventually working for the University of Virginia? And tell me about that.
I retired from the nonprofit in December of 2018. I am a known researcher, genealogy researcher in the area. I belong to several, like genealogy groups. I attend national conferences, and I do a lot of presentations, so on the teaching side. And so I got a phone call. I knew there was activities going on in the community, that the university was looking at doing a memorial to the enslaved laborers that built the university for Thomas Jefferson. And I live in that area. And so I attended some of the community meetings, but still working on my own research, and I was taking clients. And I got a phone call from one of the gentlemen who was on the commission for slavery at the university, and basically, what are you doing? And so he just said, this is what we're looking at. We're looking for a descendant project researcher, and their goal is to find descendants of the enslaved laborers. And for me, that was like the dream job, because the research I love. How many of us get to research basically 24/7? And that was a perfect thing for me to really be happy about being retired.
So you must have been very well known. You said that they knew that you were a genealogist in the area, but tell me more about, you said that you got interested in genealogy from hearing your mother's stories about your roots, but then tell me how that developed into becoming a genealogist that had a reputation such that the University of Virginia would know about you and call you. What things did you do as a genealogist in order for you to develop this reputation?
Well, that's a good question. My mother told me she sat at the foot of her, or at the feet of her grandmother, and that her grandmother, besides some of the stories, but the one story was that her grandfather was a slave. And it was shocked. It was like, what? We got a slave in the family. What is that? Wait, what does that even mean? And I knew she was doing the research. This is in the late 70s. And so I was like, I got to do this. I got to help. She never worked in an office. So there was a lot of things I knew she didn't know because she just wasn't exposed to it. And the research bug grabbed me, and it has never left me. And it is just a highlight of my day. And as crazy as it might sound, I have my conversations talking to these documents and these records, and, reading of these stories about people in their lives, enslaved, free, and all realms and aspects, what they did, what the kids did, who they married, who died. It was just something that I feel people should look at and need to know their family and know their ancestry, where their roots are from. And also the need to do it was just as critical as the research. And so coming from, having a doctorate and learning how to research at different levels, in the scholarly level, I apply a lot of what I do in my presentations from that business world and that scholarly world. So I have that passion of teaching people and using methods and strategies to do their research that helps them as well as helping me. Because I feel I learn just as much as what I teach. I learn from the people that are attending. And questions come up, which is also, I take them as challenges. And so I'll give them 2 or 3 things that they could try, you know. So I learned from what they're having brick walls on, as we call it, and try it myself. And if it works, I could build out a whole method or strategy for people to try that could help enhance their work. So it's really a passion, a love. And again, I've done a lot of presentations at the national level, state level, and the local level. And I attended those community meetings. That was very impressive and very fascinating that this university was going to step out and identify these enslaved laborers. And then the root of where all that came from is because a group of students challenged a university basically saying, you got this little bitty plaque over here about the enslaved workers. And it ended up that the president put a whole commission, the president at that time, put a whole commission on slavery at the university together, and there it went. And they start pulling records and start building this, and it ended up that they know there was up to 4,000 people over a period that were enslaved laborers. They've got the memorial built. My only interaction with the person that called and offered me the job was the community meetings and aspects at the Historical Society, which I ended up being right now the current president. There's 598 names on the wall. Some of them don't have last names, and some only have last name, no first names. Some have the slave owners and some don't. And so the easiest tactic was to go after the ones that had a first name and a last name, and also research the slave owner. And I love it. It's challenging, but you know, I just expect the challenges because it's slave era research, and I embrace it. And I just figure out in my mind, whatever challenge I have doing research is going to make me a better researcher.
Are there any stories from the outcomes of your research for the university that really touch you?
Yeah. There's one of the families I was working with, and they have an ancestor. On my little list, I have the name of Alfred, and I have a name of Henry. And I knew who the slave owner was. And so I connected with this family who they saw the same names, and their ancestor was purchased, and it was purchased by James Barber. She was born in a 12-year-old, and she was born in Gloucester County, Virginia. She was sold at the auction blocks in Richmond, 12 years old. And James Barber purchased her, and they had sent me a picture of the document, like the bill of sale. And then I went to Special Collections and saw the actual document. So there was a whole bunch of emotions with that, and a 12-year-old. And then looking at these inventories and the price or the value that they put on people was insane. You know, your 300, this ancestor of someone's is $300 or $1,200. And being able to come to terms with that a lot of times, and I know it's there. You know, I've been doing this over 30 years. I know it's there. But when you got a name and they connect to somebody and I can see them, you know, it carries on some emotion for me. I got teary-eyed right now thinking about little Priscilla at 12 years old. And I remember one of the bill of sales or one of the inventory sheets that I saw had a female was $300.50. I bawled like a baby about that. I couldn't get the 50 cents. I understood the 300. But the 50 cents, on a human's life, that just tore me up. You know, and again, getting teary-eyed about that because there's a lot of emotion. And it's great to find folks But I looked at some records and things, and I looked at people's ages and realized, like, if they're 80 or 90 or 100 years old, they were enslaved their whole life. There's a whole nother thought process there when I think about somebody living their whole life, and they, made it to 1865 to freedom, but they were enslaved. But then there's a happy part about that could have been someone's ancestor that came in from Africa, because they would have been born before 1776, before it was even the United States or independent of Great Britain. And so there's highlights, but there's sad moments also. And then there's angry moments as well. And thinking of looking at estate documents, and they got to pay their debt by selling off and breaking up families. That's hard to do. And they did it without thinking twice. And it's just like, who are these people? Where does this even come from? And how did it really continue to happen? So again, the emotions go up and down. And sometimes I got to talk to somebody. So I get a genealogy buddy or somebody and got to talk to them and basically to calm myself down. And sometimes it's with the descendants and helping them to understand, for both of us to understand about what happened with their ancestor. And again, sharing that information and helping people find their roots. For African Americans in this country, in the United States, I think it's critical. And we need to know these stories, and we need facts that back it up. And it's there. You just got to go after it and get it. And I think the legacy is even another part, is to understand that your children know about their ancestors as well. So, I have my little short missions in life, even though it's my job to find this. And once they get the information, they can share it. So that's the beauty of the research.
Talking about the necessity of knowing one's own ancestors and stories, what are some of the stories that you uncovered about your own family over your 30 plus years of research?
Oh, gosh. The mixture of my family was kind of, it sounds stupid, but the shock, it's like, I didn't realize we were so mixed, and I embraced that. Everybody, my ancestors are my ancestors. You don't pick and choose, but it was with connecting with the research and where the research information could be at, because we're so mixed. My mother's father is white, and so that was a different avenue when I was looking at the majority of my dad's people, or the majority of her more recent ancestors, who would have been mixed mulatto or black, or Negro, colored, depending on who I'm looking at and what the record says. But it was just so diverse. And I thought, you know what? This is American history. The family makeup of mine is probably just as common as everybody else's. But the influences of where I lived and grew up in Michigan would be different probably than somebody that maybe grew up in Virginia. So I like the fact of the mixture, and the fact that it tells a little bit of everybody that's in this country. And, I stake claim to this country. This is my country. My people were here. I don't want to say since dirt turned over, but, my people were here. This is my land and stuff. And I'm proud of all of the ancestors. There's slaveholders in there, and there's even a black slaveholder in there.
Well, tell me stories about those. Which stories are most significant to you, and also touch upon that black slaveholder?
Yeah, I researched my mother's father's side, and we can take it way back to England. And when I say way back, the oldest ancestor I have on her direct line from her dad goes back to the ancestor being born in the 1400s and Lancashire, England. And we're able to track that all the way here and I'm going to say to the new country or, now the United States. And so the interest, I have a love for military. And my dad, of course, was in World War II, and my oldest brother was a Vietnam veteran. And he's 100% PTSD and having to live through that because I was about 16 when he went off to Vietnam, and who left is not who came back. So I tend towards a lot of the military. We've got an ancestor that I've done a lot of research on that was killed in World War II. He passed for white. They did not know that this man, Calvin Davis, was in their planes and he was a radio gunner. And he was, they classify him as, that time a Negro or mulatto. And so I'm proud of that fact, even though he lost his life on November 30th, 1944, during a bombing run in Merseburg, Germany. There are 6 people in the plane, and 6 of them died and 3 survived. And as a radio gunner, they were pretty much locked in their space because it's a very small, arena up in that plane. And it was either a B-17 or a B-24 off the top of my head. I can't remember. And I've wrote a lot of stories, little blogs on him. And I think I'm going to do a book. I was able to contact the 3 people that survived that plane crash and was able to access some magnificent documents, even to who found the bodies from the crash. And his dog tags was on one of his limbs that was on the crash. And the Germans scooped up all of that, his dog tag. So that identified that he was one killed and which plane they knew which one it was. And I had talked to one of the survivors of the plane who was still alive. And to my knowledge, he's still alive. And they had no idea that Calvin was a person of color. And the strange thing was that my mother told a story. And again, one of these things that piqued my interest in military, because she said she remembered Calvin coming and visiting all of the relatives. He came home on a R&R and from the military, and he went from house to house to say goodbye to everybody. And when he left the house, my mother said that she remembered her mother saying, "He's not coming back." And that was the end of that. Everybody knew him. He was like a high school track star, and to this day the record has not been beaten yet. And so, but it was exciting to find out that he was a person of color and during World War II, and he was up in a plane, and this is just before Tuskegee Airmen got all approved and everything, and it was like 1940, 41. I always think he looked like I would call him a colored, the guy that played in Gone with the Wind, and I can't think of his name right now, but he looked like him. He had wavy hair. So we've got a picture of him with a BBC mic, and he was over in England, and it was a Red Cross social. All this is coming from my research. Red Cross social, and this gentleman was on the radio for BBC, and he yodeled. In which it was noted in a newspaper article. And I thought, oh my God. Of course, I'm 20th century thinking, 21st century thinking, oh my God, I got a black man that yodels in the family. Good Lord, where is this coming from? But it was noted because it was on the war radio, and somebody locally up in that county had heard that. And then, of course, it was in the newspaper. Another story, when I talked about the black slave owner, my second great-grandmother, who was Mary Goins, and she married George Marsh. Well, 3 of her siblings married Ropers. And the Roper family was interesting because Nicholas Roper, who came from Suffolk, England, came into Jefferson County, Virginia at the time, and he only had one child, and that child's name was James Roper. And James Roper, of course, his mother was one of Nicholas Roper's slaves. So that is the only child that this Nicholas Roper had. So all of his holdings was left to that kid. And at 11 years old, he gave him a 99-year lease. And of course, in the will, everything went to him, which included his father's slaves. And so he continued on having the slaves. And of course, he gets married and has kids. But as a slave owner, I know he killed a slave. I know he was hunting down a runaway because I found the ad. But what was interesting about the Roper side of the family was that kind of half of the kids from James Roper, the mulatto child, slave owner, half of the kids passed for white and other half stayed black. So researching, I'm looking different ways, different records, just all on the same family. And a few years ago, there was a family reunion. Well, two of them, actually. I got a flyer to attend 2 Roper family reunions in the same county. And I thought to myself, I know these people know they're all related.
Did your family decide to go black or white in that situation? What are your direct ancestors?
My direct would be, on that side of the family, they would be black. But the white ancestors are there too.
So the ones that decided to go white, have you ever met with them?
I went to the black family reunion and I met one of the white Roper line, and the rest was only through email, and I've never met any other in person, only the blacks in that same county. And there has not been any communication except for one of the sons of, the mulatto slave owner. And because that side of the family went to Canada, and the children of that line had reached out to me because they knew something wasn't right, and they were researching the Ropers, and they couldn't figure it out. The lady that contacted me, or the cousin that contacted me, her 95-year-old grandmother was the grandchild of the slave owner, the black slave owner, and she took it to her grave. And they thought it was Indian. They weren't quite sure if it was black. They just didn't know, but they knew there was a secret and that grandmother was not telling.
How did they react to the information that you provided that actually everyone was the same? It's just people decided to identify white or black.
She was excited for, number one, figuring out that it was something that was a hidden secret, a mystery. And so she was excited, and her mother was excited to finally know about it. And they embraced, and we just keep in touch over the years. I can't say that for anybody else.
Are there any other family stories from your research that really resonate with you?
There's some pride, and knowing that, you had ancestors in the 1600s in Virginia. And again, that's my Goins line. And then on my mother's dad's side of the family, the most interesting stuff, again, can go back to the Revolutionary War, the Mayflower. And it's just fascinating that, okay, these white people have black descendants. They might not know about it, but I'm going to tell it. And then it's also interesting, and again, I have the passion for the military. I don't know what it is. I guess maybe because I didn't make it in the military to be able to serve my country, but I respect so much of those that do in the families, and some of my volunteer work with the Red Cross have to do with military families. So, another interesting story is a great-grandfather on my father's side. I got a name. And that's it. I don't know when, where he was born. And I know that him and his wife, who are my great-grandparents, I know they had a baby, and that's my grandfather. In records and whatever resources, he's born in 3 different locations. His birth date stayed the same. But again, he's taken me down 3 different rabbit holes. I found the name of his father because my dad and them, that kind of stuff wasn't talked on the Murphy side. They didn't talk about their family. So there wasn't a lot that they knew. And this great-grandfather's name is William Michael Murphy. And all I could figure out about him is that he might have been born in Indian Territory. And his wife, or my grandfather's mother, was Nellie. I know where she's from. I've researched her line, but I cannot find my great-grandfather, William Michael Murphy. I can find all these enslaved ancestors and other people's ancestors, and I can't find my great-grandfather, and to me, it sounds like it's so simple, but he's defeating me. And that's one of those other missions in life, like going to school, that I've got to find this man before I die. Because there has to be a man or there's an immaculate conception, one or the other. I don't know what it is, but I've got to find William Michael Murphy. So, and I try to spend at least 5 or 10 minutes a day taking a look for him.
Let's talk about your Revolutionary War patriot ancestor. How did you discover that you descended from someone who contributed to the independence of the United States of America?
Well, that's a great story. I actually was in contact. His name is John Boyer. And I made contact with another researcher who was a Boyer. And on for about 15 years, we shared research, and me researching the Boyer line. And my great-grandmother is a Boyer, and so is my great-great-grandmother. And she mentioned, oh, well, you know, this line goes to a patriot. A patriot of what? Was my response. And over the years, I learned that she lived out in Utah and Mormon. And of course, that was all new. And so I started researching that because I wanted to know more and which one. She says, oh, gosh, there's several of them. So I started working that line, that Boyer line, and I started finding them. And all of these roots of the patriots that I've identified so far are pretty much all out of New York. And so I was shocked, totally shocked. I never equated, and again, white line, black line, didn't matter. I just never equated that somebody was from the Revolutionary War time. And I don't know why I didn't even think of that, because as much as I love the military, you know, I kind of just stayed with Civil War and coming forward. So when she told me that, I went crazy. And, you know, trying to figure out and understand, what is this about the Revolutionary War? Talk to me about the North and South, you know, but the Revolution, had no idea. So that was a different type of research, because now I'm in a different century and the records are different, not what I was used to. And kept in contact with her, finally met her in person. And about 5 years ago, I went to a conference out in Salt Lake City called Roots Tech, and met her in person and took pictures, shared stories. And again, we communicated through email for a good 15 years. I'd never even seen a picture of her, and she had never seen a picture of me. So now we're in contact all the time. We're both on Facebook.
She black or white?
She's white. Very much so white.
What does very white mean?
It was just like, wait a minute, even though we've got white in the family, but again, beautiful lady and very open. And again, she also had served in the military. And so she knew my love of that. And when I identified as very white, as blonde head, blue eyed. And that's why I said that. I know it sounds crazy.
Well, I understand because you identify as Black, but some of your ancestors identified as white. So you have to tell me, like, you have to explain to people what white, really white versus no, you're really mixed, but you're identifying as white, but you're really Black. Right. So I get it.
Yeah. And in different environments, I have to explain that myself. People
What does that mean?
Well, because I'm light skinned, and wherever I'm at, when I lived in Hawaii, they assumed I was Hawaiian. When I was in Arkansas, they weren't sure what I was. Are you white? You Puerto Rican? What are you growing up? And I remember living in Florida, the building director asked me point blank, are you white? What's your background? And I worked for a very prominent person here in Virginia. And she asked me the same question. But first she said, well, who are you? Meaning, what's your background, your ethnic background? And I looked at her and I said, huh? And she said, well, what are you made of? Yeah, and I thought, oh, you want to know what race I identify with or what color? And I said, Black, African American. And I typically say I'm American with African ancestry. But again, over the years in my own experience, that white people don't see mixed people. They can't see a mixed heritage person. They will always think that they're white or something else. And Black people would say, oh, they got something in them. And just meaning not negative, that just meaning that they are mixed in their heritage. We understand that. That means two different races came together, and this is the result. We see it through slavery. We see it without slavery, and it even happens today. And again, I'm light skinned. Everybody I grew up with knew we all identified as Black and raised Black. And even my mother, you could not tell she had an ounce of African ancestry in her, but I would caution people to call her white because she will passionately tell you that she's not. And so, it was growing up in different environments, like I had to sometimes choose or explain. I wasn't raised that way. My daughter chose to be friends with everybody and not just Black kids or not just white kids. And she looks like me, but she's not as light skinned as I am. But that was some of that culture shock from her coming from Hawaii in that environment to Tallahassee, Florida. They wanted her to choose. She couldn't have Black and white friends in the little school that she went to. It was rough for her when we first got here until she got accustomed, number one, being around her own people because she was raised around a whole bunch of different cultures and races in Hawaii. And so she just had not just been exposed to, say, Black and white. We have Latinos in the family, close in the family. So that's normal for us to have that around us. But just for her to see Black, white, she was not accustomed to that.
I'm going to make you choose a race for your Patriot Revolutionary War ancestor, John Boyer. Was he white?
Oh,
or
he's
Black?
All white. All
Okay.
white. Oh, definitely white.
All right. What was his service? He served under Jacob Clock.
Yes.
He suffered damages by the enemy. Do you know what that means, damages? Did he get injured?
No, he lost his horse. Help me understand that. And then I just tracked the family from there. I had him in my tree already, but I didn't know he was the one. And with the help of my cousin Gail, I was able to conclude it and then got introduced to DAR from a friend. Because Gail said, well, you can get in DAR with that. Okay, what the heck is DAR?
The Daughters of the American Revolution?
Yes, Daughters of the American Revolution. But I also had heard of it, but I didn't think women of color were allowed.
What year was this?
I would say I got in 2013, so it would have been just a few years before then. And I only knew about the Marian Anderson type information about DAR, which I thought was negative. and it was negative. And and I thought, well, I can't get in there because I'm a person of color. And then met somebody that was in.
So even as late as 2011, let's say, or 2012, you still had the impression that the DAR did not allow Black members.
Absolutely. Because I had never researched anybody associated with the Revolutionary War.
But if you've learned that you descended from a patriot of the American Revolution, why didn't you think that you would qualify to join?
Because it was a little white or a big white organization by white women only. I had never read anything else, never knew about anybody of color that was ever in the Revolutionary War, had not even learned that much that they were Black patriots even, besides the white patriots and American Indian patriots. Had no clue. Civil War research, love it, but did not know because I had never researched it, so had no idea.
So what was your feeling? You talked about it some before, but now you learned you descend from a patriot of the American Revolution, someone who fought for the independence of this nation, and you're a Black woman. Did that change how you felt about yourself or how you identified?
Absolutely. I still identify as an American with African ancestry, African American, but now where I have these patriots, and it was kind of overwhelming that somebody in my line helped this country break from the British. And the pride just beamed. And again, that love of the military came out. So I had to creep past the Civil War and start researching and studying this, and heard about Forgotten Patriots book that DAR put out. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I'm totally in 100% and hope that there's more women of color coming in, and it's almost a mission that we have just as much right to be in there as they do. And it doesn't matter if your patriot's white or Black. It was about the cause and the mission and what they were after. And so I say everybody should go for it. If I'm telling friends or relatives, you guys go for it. We had people that were there, and I'm working on the Black patriot right now, trying to confirm that he's mine along with the other white patriots that I have. And, I've got some supplemental applications in right now on other patriots.
So supplementals are additional patriots that you have identified in addition to the primary patriot under which you joined. So these supplementals, you're saying that you've identified more patriots and you want to get those aligned with your name and your ancestry and approved by the DAR as far as your family lineage. Is that correct?
Yes, I have 4 pending right now. Besides, John Boyer, I'm in, and that's secured. And I've been in since 2013. And I just thought, I love seeing these women walk around with these pens and all these patriots. And I thought, you know what? Let me go check some more.
So you're talking about the pins that each woman wears, an ancestor bar, as you will, that are pins that represent each one of their Revolutionary War ancestors. And I hear that you're saying that you had one pin that said, John Boyer, that's my Revolutionary War patriot, and you wanted more of those pins to wear.
Absolutely. So you hear my little competitive stuff coming out, right? Even down to the brownies. They wanted to cheated me out of doing certain things they did. So I had to beat them at different things. So yes, I do have 4 more that I put in pending, and I have 3 more to go in.
What are their stories? Tell me about these additional patriots that you have identified.
Okay. Well, one is Joe Petrie, and he, of course, is out of New York. And he was also around that same Oriskany battle in the Tyrone area of New York. Henry Ritter is another one, born in New York. And most of these are like either a fourth great grandfather or a fifth great grandfather. And then Henry Ritter's father, Johann, he's my fifth great grandfather. He was a sergeant and he was at the Oriskany battle and he was killed in the service and, during the Revolutionary War. And then I have Joseph Newman, and he's the fourth great grandfather, and he fought with Massachusetts and New York, but, born in New York, but he also became a prisoner. And so those are the four that I'm pending. They're actually at DAR right now, pending. And then I've got three more that I've targeted and started the research on. And one is Arnold, who is my fourth great grandfather that's not in the DAR database. And so there's no membership under him, but he received the pension and everything. Again, he's born in New York. No, I'm sorry. He was born in Connecticut, Stonington, New London County, Connecticut. And he served through Rhode Island and New York and had a little term with under George Washington. And so he dies in 1840 in New York. And so that's Arnold Warden. And then his dad, Nathaniel Warden, again, born in Connecticut, but he served under the New York regiments and things. And then there's one, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's Dutch, but his first name is Marcellus. And of course, he's a fourth great grandfather. He's born like 1726, but he dies in 1777 in New York. And I'm trying to verify if he died, during something in the service or, that same Oriskany battle where they were at, because it seems like all of them are pretty much from the same area and all fought around the same area in the same battles. And that's around that Tyrone County, New York. And some of these folks are from Albany, Herkimer County, in that area. And so I'm going to pull as many as I can and make sure the family and, like I said, all my first cousins and down know that these kids have a long history with this country. And there's one loyalist that I've done some research on, but I'm sticking with the Patriots right now.
Why did you join the Daughters of the American Revolution?
Because I was not wanted before. And I'd like being associated. And I'm saying that as for all women of color. They didn't pretty much want Black women in there. It's different now, but it was a challenge to be able to get in there. Number one, look at my research, but the pride that comes with the association of the Revolutionary War and the accomplishments. And I believed in what the Daughters of the American Revolution, their mission on the education, the history, the preservation, and of course their love of the military and support of veterans and remarking graves and all the activities that they do. So I have a side mission is to find as many African American women I can that might have roots to a patriot. That's a whole nother thing, because it's our place just as well as it is the white person's place. And at these points that a lot of these white patriots, they've got descendants of color. And they got to be just as proud in the families of the work and the service that our ancestors have done. So again, it's just really a passion to know how much value that our ancestors, and this could be anybody's ancestors, not just mine, the value that we have to this country and what has done, even back to my work at UVA and looking for the descendants of the enslaved ancestors. Those folks were rented to the university. They built that university, and those buildings that they built are still standing. And then you think about Thomas Jefferson. He's probably the most researched president in the world. And it was his university that all these people their sweat and blood and tears and sacrifices. And I think it's a mission that people need to know. I think the African Americans need to know what their ancestors did to contribute to building that university. And I think we're part. They can't separate, don't take anything from us. We give, we've served. I don't think there's a war in this country's history that there wasn't Black involvement.
You mentioned that you weren't wanted, or women that look like you weren't wanted by the DAR previously. So why would you want to go into an organization that didn't want you before?
Well, the main reason is because they didn't want me and they got me. They got me now. And I'm going to make sure there's others that come behind me. And I wanted to be there because I have a place there just like they do. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an equal with them. And I believe the first woman of color that came in was in 1977. And it was almost like, oh my gosh, are you serious? and we got over 6,000 that served. And we're still finding some that are not even in that Forgotten Patriots book. We're finding new ones. My Joseph's not in there. But it was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. We got to tell these stories. So now it's a passion to be included and respected just as much as everyone else, because our people served and bled the same color blood that theirs did. I like the values that they have, and the things they do for the veterans. And it's my right, and I deserve it. And anybody else in the same situation should have that opportunity as well.
Once you became a member, was it any different than you imagined when you stepped into your first meeting and you met other members? How did you feel?
Well, they knew that I was a person of color. The regent at the time, I was her first person. She was a new regent, and I was the first person that was basically inducted under her reign. And I knew her personally. We were already involved in a genealogy group. So I was comfortable with her and one other person that I knew at that time back in 2013. There were people that looked at me, and I knew a feeling like, who is she? Where'd she come from? And nobody's ever questioned anything as far as, are you Black or anything? That didn't happen. So it was, I was welcomed in and very much a part of the group, because there's about almost 100 members in this group, and it's been around the chapter that I'm with since like 1926. And again, so friendships start growing, and everything is cool and great. But I go to district meetings, and I think I'm the only one in the district. So, I got to fix that. I got to find some more, daughters and of color. I'm going to find those ancestors, the descendants, and help them. And it says it's open, so we're coming.
How do people react when you tell them, or do you tell them that you are a member of the DAR? Do they bring up the topic of the society's past history of discrimination?
That's the first thing that comes up in any conversation is, they don't want you in there. About the Marian Anderson thing from the 1930s and all of that stuff. And, they refused to let her sing at Constitution Hall. And there was a lot of issues that happened around that denial back then. And I think the organization has suffered a little bit from it. Even, Eleanor Roosevelt said, I don't basically, and I'm saying it in my own words, I don't want to be part of an organization that's denying people their right. And so her and some of her friends left as members of the Daughters of the American Revolution because they weren't, number one, didn't let Marian Anderson sing, and eventually she got invited and all of that later. But our country is gotta address the fact and the history. It's there. We can't change it, but we gotta tell the truth about it, because I'm identifying these patriots, Black patriots, even though I help with the white patriots too, but I'm all really looking for the Black patriot descendants. And then we'll tell them about the daughters of the American Revolution or the sons of the American Revolution for the males. And I just had a conversation with my son about that just a couple of nights ago. I said, the research is done. I want you to consider joining this organization. My oldest brother went in, and he, of course, as a Vietnam veteran and the whole 9 yards, he loved it, and he's very involved in it. And my son was like, why? And I told him, I said, you got to network this. You're over in a foreign country. And if you come back here to the mainland, you need to have connections. And if you don't have those same connections you had, before you went overseas, then SAR or Sons of the American Revolution could be a connection for you. And it could be a good resume item, because folks that belong to organizations, yes, they look for other people that belong to the organization. And I said, the application is done. It's a copy of mine, basically, or even his grandmother's and, my mother. And because I put her application in, and she just got in, and she's excited because she said the same thing. She was excited that I did all of it, but she thought, what do you want me to do? I said, Mom, you're already involved, and had to talk to her about that. And she was excited and proud, now waiting for her little DAR pin that the local chapter gives, and waiting for that to come in. She said, I don't need that other stuff, the ribbon and stuff, but I have a ribbon for her, and we'll get her a bar, with John Boyer on it and everything.
Your mother comes from a different generation that really experienced segregation. How does she reconcile joining the DAR?
Well, my mother came from, remember, a white father and a mulatto mother, and a little county called Benzie County, which their family is believed, my grandmother's side of the family was believed to have been the first people of color that homesteaded in that county. They were in a very rural area. And so she didn't have the same experiences until she moved to Grand Rapids, to the city. And then she got, I'm going to say, the normal Black-white issues and things like that. She got married at a young age, and again, had 5 kids by the time she was 25. She is 90 years old now and just joined the DAR, and she's proud of it. She gets it. She understands it.
Have you described to her or to others what the DAR is like today versus the perception that maybe others have, like you did, that it wasn't an inclusive society and there weren't Black members? Have you had a chance to educate other people about how the DAR looks today?
Yes, and that's on a regular basis. And of course, she knows just because she hears my conversations. And she knows a couple of the ladies that I know, and we've even had a meeting here at our house. So she got to meet other ladies in the group. We had a board meeting here.
Other white ladies?
All white ladies.
Okay. They all came to your house?
Yes, they all came, and we had a meeting, and it was just like family up in here. We ate, we talked, we got business done, and she was sitting there crocheting. And my mom, since I've been in, she crochets shawls and scarves and donates them, but she's donating her time. We use them as the auctions or things as giveaways and to help raise funds, for our chapter.
And your relationship with these other white women in the chapter and on the board, it sounds like you said they came in your house and it was like family. So you have some friendships with these women?
I have friendship with these women. We do things together. And matter of fact, as I serve as membership chair for the chapter, And one of the things when I was working on my supplementals, I invited all who wanted to come, and 4 other ladies came, and we worked on our supplementals together. And again, it's also building relationships, and I feel very comfortable with them now. And so, because again, I'm membership chair for my chapter, and so I help whoever needs help on the genealogy side. And my job basically is to help them and find new members. And I think genealogy and community history is a new way of community engagement. And I wish these different organizations and local governments would take the opportunity to use that method of community engagement by everybody being at the table and discussing the histories. And because the common goal doesn't have anything to do with who's melanated or not, or who looks like this or not, or how you identify. It's about finding those that came before us.
When people meet you, prospective members, you as the membership chair, you're Black. If they can figure out that you're Black, they may think that you're white. How do they react in knowing that your chapter has decided to have a Black woman be the face of their, I guess, new member recruitment position?
I don't even think they thought of it that way. But they appreciate the work that I do and the work that I do with the prospective members of DAR. And, I do a lot of the presentations at Historical Society or for a chapter or for another chapter. And, sharing information depending on what the topic is. And I remember one talk I did for a chapter in another county, Augusta County, Virginia, in one of the chapters, and it's been several years. And it was about, the presentation was really about, who's really wanted here. And it talked about, the different ethnic groups that came into the country and what makes up the country. And so who belongs here, which it basically ends up saying everybody. That's the history of this country, was welcoming. People came in. How they came in was differently. But once they were here, laws were controlled, and then it did change. But the goal from when the boat rolls up, you basically were welcomed. And everybody's got a different history and view of how their people got here, but we're here and this is our country. And we need to remember the founding fathers were smart. Because even issues we're dealing with today, there's certain things that people would like to change, but the founding fathers were actually smarter than what I used to give them credit for. And because that Constitution is sound and it's written the way it is, even though it left out the African Americans in there, but in the things that we might be facing now because of what they did there and things that are protected, it's going to hard for a wrong side, I would say it like that, to break that Constitution or try to change it. So I have to give some credit back to those founding fathers during that time to have the insight that there's going to be two different views, two different sides, and everybody thinks differently. But how do you make it solid that we still keep our patriotism and our faith to the country and the protection of the country and those that are here? And again, yes, they did not put Africans or African Americans in that, and a lot of that history, and it's coming back to haunt them. But I've been embraced by my chapter. There's never been anything negative.
What does being a member of the DAR mean to you?
This country is known as the richest, the wealthiest, and even with the ugly side of its history, it's still our country. And I have pride that from the Revolutionary War and even before then, but to be able to have that red, white, and blue, and my family helped that become what it is. I'm staking my claim because of my ancestors that fought or provided a service. My folks, white, black, whoever they were, helped lay the foundation of this country.